This report is brought to you by Cerule, makers of a new category of plant-based products scientifically proven to naturally increase the number of adult stem cells in circulation. This offers a variety of benefits to reduce the effects of human aging. I have a nagging tennis injury, a rotator cuff shoulder problem. Surgery is pretty iffy, so I've been a long-time user of glucosamine products. They don't help much, but that has been my only alternative. So I gave it a try. The rep told me that it would usually take several months before any noticeable difference would occur. First week, nothing. Second week, maybe a little better. But then by the third week, all of a sudden I realized it was a lot better. All I can say is Stem Enhance has worked for us, and non-invasively. Yes, I could have paid $5,000 to have a stem cell injection into my shoulder, but it wears off. Why not stimulate the body's natural ability to generate the stem cells itself, which then travel naturally wherever they are needed for a fraction of the cost? One visit to a doctor can cost more than a month's supply of this product. There's a lot of science behind this. I wouldn't be advertising it otherwise. This works. Check out their website at billstill.cerule.com. There's also a 30-day money-back guarantee on a single bottle purchase, so you can try it risk-free.
Welcome back to Truth Be Told Network, radio, podcast, and you can find this on the Rumble channel. This is being recorded on Friday the 20th. It will be aired on Saturday the 21st. So a lot of things may happen between now and then. It does seem that everything is spinning out of control. The world is on fire, and everything seems to be changing so quickly that it's really difficult to keep up. I mean, you're seeing one thing 1 minute and then everything changes the next. But in light of the world being on fire and all the situation in Israel and just the whole world, basically, a lot of people have come to realize that President Trump was a good president and will be a good president again. I have seen it on social media. I have seen a lot of people saying they don't want to admit it, but he was right. And one person who is saying this and is not backing down is a billionaire and a Democrat voter. And his name I'm going to butcher, but it's Shamath Palihapitiya. I'm sure that's wrong. But anyway, he admits he was wrong about Trump and says, in fact, that Trump derangement syndrome did more harm than Trump himself. And I wanted you to actually hear him say this out of his own mouth. I found his comments to be enlightening.
As a Democrat who has been left homeless, who is now definitely in the center, but probably leaning increasingly right, I'm left yet again with an appreciation, despite the messenger of the message of the Trump administration, because what those guys did was pretty incredible in hindsight. These Abraham Accords, the accords with Israel and the GCC, the almost accord between Israel and Saudi, to really be able to find a long-lasting peace is just a real example for the world. And those guys did a lot of really good work. This is a moment where you have to start to re-underwrite, is your, not you, Jason, but I'm just saying collectively, is one's Trump derangement syndrome causing more damage than anything that Trump could have actually done? And I think the answer is yes, because it's now causing us to not see that good work and then embrace and extend it. So much of the work that happened in that administration turns out to have been right. And that's what's so frustrating for me. The work on the border wall. We didn't like the messenger, so we killed the message. Turned out it was right. Issuing long-term debt to refinance when rates were at zero. We didn't like the messenger, so we killed the message. A structural peace in the Middle East. We didn't like the messenger, so we killed the message. when are we going to stop shooting ourselves in the foot? And when are we going to actually see and take the time to look past who is saying things and actually listen to them word for word? I'll give you an example. I started to tweet 3 links a day over the past 3 days. And the only reason I did that was I thought things were so hyper contentious and hyper partisan that I just wanted to show a few sides, right? And one day I found a couple links, 2 of which, one was from Jonathan Greenblatt of the ADL, who I thought had a very powerful message. And one was from Mike Flynn. And his message was also actually pretty powerful if you just read it. And if you took the names off, all the content was so valuable, both points of view. But the minute it goes into the world, people immediately judge and they kill the message because of the messenger. And this is exactly a moment where you have an opportunity to just stop doing that because the stakes are so high.
Exactly right. I mean, he said that so well. They don't like the message because of the messenger. How many times have you had somebody say in your own personal life, well, you didn't like it because it came out of my mouth? I mean, that is true for us personally. It is true for us nationally and internationally. If you don't like the messenger, you're going to turn off the message. And we saw that again and again and again. Now, I want to share something that the Lord said to me early on when President Trump was running for president, and people were up in arms, particularly the Christian community. They didn't like the way he spoke. They didn't like his language. They didn't like the tough talk. And I went to the Lord about all of this. And he said that President Trump, in part, was a test to see if my children can hear my voice through a man who uses coarse, rough words. And that was a wake-up call, I guess, for me. But also, I think an important thing to remember, God does not choose the perfect messenger. A lot of times he chooses somebody who is exactly the opposite of who you would think he would choose. I mean, look at Gideon hiding in the threshing floor, and the angel of the Lord comes in and calls him a man of valor. Well, he didn't look much like a man of valor hiding in the threshing floor. It's not important who other people say you are, or I am, or anyone is. What is important is who does God say you are? And I've said it before, I will say it again. God chose President Trump to lead this nation, and I'll say the world. And all of the things that President Trump says he will do and did, basically, is God saying to America, I will make America great again. I will restore your prosperity. I will do this and I will do that. But the vessel through which he has chosen to work is President Donald J. Trump. And a lot of people are still saying, but he's not this and he's not that. It doesn't matter. God does not choose perfect people. None of us are perfect. And one of the things I get really tired of hearing people say about Donald Trump, and if you notice, they do not say this about anyone else. They say, well, he's not a perfect man. And let me stop right there. Who is? We have had one perfect man, to my knowledge, on this earth, and they crucified him. Now, I'm not comparing President Trump to Jesus. A lot of people say he's not the Savior. No, but he is the one that God has chosen for such a time as this. And that man has paid a bigger price than you or I ever could for what he has done. And I'm not talking about money. He has lost friends. He has lost a lot of money. He has been eviscerated in the press. They have never given him. And now some of them are beginning to say, Trump was right. Well, we had a saying. In fact, My Twitter handle for a while was Trump was right again, because during the campaign, President Trump would say something that would seem to be out of line. And yet, in 3 weeks, I always said, give it 3 weeks. He'll turn out to be right. He always turned out to be right. He was right about them giving money to Iran, what it would happen, what it would unleash on the world. And look what has happened. Look where we are. And we will talk about that in a minute. But I want to take a little time to talk about this man God has chosen. God chosen. I didn't. You wouldn't have either. But you also probably wouldn't have chosen most of the disciples. If you looked at him, you definitely would not have chosen Paul, who was killing Christians. I wouldn't have. I mean, why would you think he would be good? President Trump is where he is for such a time as this. God has his hand on him. God will continue to have his hand on him. And it does not matter what man does. It does not matter what it looks like. As we have been saying for weeks, it's going to get worse. Things are going to look worse. But as Christians, we are told we live by faith, not by sight. I don't know what percentage of what the media says is fake news or wrong or misleading, but a huge percentage of it is. The CIA says they stopped doing the Mockingbird program. Doesn't look to me like they did. I don't know about you, but whenever somebody puts up one of those montages of the mainstream media using the exact same phrase in CNN, in NBC, ABC, all of them, they use the exact same phrasing. It's like it's a dreary day. It's a dreary day. It's a dreary day. And it's funny because then all of a sudden one person will go, it's a cloudy day. And everybody's like, what? Wait, fire that person. They said they used the wrong word. But they use exactly the same phrasing again and again and again. So they're being told what to say, how to react to this. And it is maddening. And it makes it really, really difficult to pull out the truth from all the lies. When we did our report last week, I talked about babies being decapitated, and somebody said that was fake news. I have looked into it. I've researched it. I've listened to other people. I don't really know, but it really doesn't matter whether they were decapitated or whether they were shot or whether they were whatever. We do know, and it is true, that parents were killed in front of their children. Children were killed in front of their parents. They were killed. What difference does it make how they were killed? With all these people up in arms about whether they were decapitated or not, it doesn't really matter. They were killed. They were murdered. Murder is murder. Sin is sin. And they have gone way beyond. I mean, they're not killing soldiers. They're not taking out, the military strongholds of Israel. They're taking out civilians. And a good example of fake news in all of this is the hospital that Israel bombed. No, Israel did not bomb a hospital. That was an errant missile fired, and it landed in the parking lot. 500 people were not killed. 500 people in the hospital were not killed. There were people killed because of the explosion, but it was in a parking lot. Cars were burned. We don't know how many people were killed, but it was not a rocket fired by Israel. And this happens every single time Israel is in war or fighting with these entities. The media jumps on the bandwagon of, well, Israel shouldn't have, and Israel this and Israel that. I have been appalled and amazed and just dismayed terribly as to seeing the reaction across the world, but particularly in America, of anti-Semitism, anti-Israel. I had been told that there was a rise in anti-Semitism across the world, but I hadn't really seen a whole lot of it. And yet now, with Harvard coming under fire because of the students who were anti-Semitic, with the funding being pulled left and right from colleges and universities all across this nation, from these protests that are happening all over this country, anti-Israel protests, and with our own members of Congress who are shouting about Israel bombing a hospital and crying, Rashida Tlaib crying about babies being killed in the hospital and being told not to cry or something. And she won't back down, and she won't stop, and she will not apologize, even though it's been proven by drones and videotape that the hospital is still standing. There are some cars burned in the parking lot and probably some people killed. We don't really know how many, but Israel didn't do it. Israel did not do that. And so there's this hue and this cry across this nation with all these college students who probably, hello, your college students, investigate this stuff for yourselves. You're smart. You have the internet. Every one of you has a laptop. You have access to a computer. Don't take the word of somebody else for it. And don't allow somebody to pay you to say these things. Now, that's what's also happening. But to get back to that, it is appalling to me to see this. But what's even more appalling is Senator Josh Hawley on the Senate floor tried to bring forth a bill that would have denounced anti-Semitism in colleges and universities, and it did not pass. It would not pass out of the Senate. And he said, you mean we can't even come against anti-Semitism from the Senate floor? He was so flustered, he didn't know what else to say. Well, that goes against their freedom of speech. Really? Because MAGA Republicans are arrested for complaining about the 2020 elections. There's a whole host of 19 people, President Trump being one of them, who were arrested for saying just that. Sidney Powell has pled guilty to a misdemeanor because they were trying to charge her with a felony. Now, I'm not going to pass judgment on what she did. I'm not her. I'm not in the situation. I know I wouldn't have the money to fight. I know I wouldn't have the money to defend myself. So her plea bargain, and part of it is she has to testify. Well, who knows? She could plead the fifth in her test. I don't know. I'm not passing judgment. But what I'm saying is they are charging these people for complaining or for working and trying to get evidence on the 2020 elections. And yet they say, oh, but it's freedom of speech when it's anti-Semitic speech in colleges and universities who are receiving federal funds that come from my tax dollars. Well, thank God that a lot of these people who have been given money to Harvard and other universities are saying, we're not going to give you one more dime. I wish I had the man's name, but he is supposedly the wealthiest person in Israel. And he's been giving money to Harvard, and he said, no more. And other universities and corporations and people's, standing up and protesting Israel. Really? Hamas is a terrorist organization like ISIS. It is a terrorist organization. And people's argument is, well, the Palestinians voted for them. Do you really think those were free and fair elections? Come on, this is a terrorist organization. I doubt those elections were free and fair. I would be shocked if that turns out to be the case. The people were blind and they didn't know that Hamas was a terrorist organization. Surely they knew that. Now, I didn't mean to get on Hamas already, but here I am. They issued a statement that the foreign hostages were taken by accident. So they're going to be returned soon. They haven't been returned yet. They're going to be returned soon. Well, what does that mean? When we feel like it, when we get enough money from Biden to return them? And it's really, really difficult. And some people don't understand this. The reason it's going to be really difficult to rescue the hostages is because they're in a tunnel system. There's a tunnel system over there that they're hiding in the tunnels. Well, soldiers go into the tunnels, they're going to get shot by Hamas, or they're going to shoot the hostages so it's going to be really hard. They're talking about sending drones in so they can have the visual of it. So in any case, that is going to be very, very hard. Major foundations have cut funding. Getting back to Harvard, major changes are being made, and changes are being made by world leaders. Emmanuel Macron is calling for the deportation of all migrants with ties to Islamic extremism from France. So we don't need this. We have the world, as I said, the world is on fire. And in the midst of the world being on fire, President Trump, the world would be not on fire if he was in office. And President Trump is dealing with all of this mess with these court cases. In the midst of all of this, they're doing all these court cases where they're trying to put him in jail. And I wanted you to hear what he has to say about going to jail himself. So let's listen to his words.
Gave a gag order today. Did you hear that on speech? Which I believe is totally unconstitutional what she did. A judge gave a gag order. A judge doesn't like me too much. Her whole life is not liking me. But she gave a gag order. You know what a gag order is? You can't speak badly about your opponent. But this is weaponry all being done because Joe Biden is losing the election and losing very, very badly to all of us in the polls. He's losing badly. But what they don't understand is that I am willing to go to jail if that's what it takes for our country to win and become a democracy again.
That brought me to tears. I am willing to go to jail if that's what it takes for America to be a democracy again. I'm stunned. I'm not sure that I would be brave enough to say the same thing, but he is willing. And I hope it doesn't come to that, but I will tell you this. If that man goes to jail, I would be shocked that the Secret Service would allow that, but if he does, I will still vote for him. I don't care what they do. I will vote for that man. If I have to write his name in, he will be the next president of the United States. And I think the world is beginning to see it. And I wanted to go back to what I said before this tape of Emmanuel Macron calling for calling for deportation of all migrants with ties to Islamic extremists. He is now calling for the deportation of Islamic extremists. When President Trump put in that travel ban, everybody called him xenophobic. Everybody said he was racist. They said, he's just racist against Muslims or whatever. Well, now all of a sudden, Emmanuel Macron is calling for the deportation of Islamic people who have ties to Islamic extremism. They're calling it extremism, not terrorism, but it doesn't matter. So you have all of these people who were really critical of President Trump saying, we have to get rid of them. We can't have them in our country. We need to deport them. Several of our senators have called for deportation of anybody who has ties to Islamic extremism because look what has happened in our own country. Look at the situations that we have had due to that factor being allowed to be free in our country. And that's what's coming across the border, as we all know. Young men, army-aged young men, they're coming from Africa, they're coming from Afghanistan. We all know that. nobody in the administration is going to do a darn thing. It's just like we said in last week. No, the Biden administration is not doing anything to get Americans out, but private citizen groups are private citizen groups. Just like they had to rescue people in Afghanistan, they're having to rescue people in Israel and the surrounding areas. So what President Trump was talking about, if you hadn't heard, he was issued a gag order. He was issued a gag order. Can't talk about the case. He can't talk about. Somebody said that it was big, larger scale than what you might think a gag order on him would be. I mean, it's just ridiculous. Can you imagine President Trump having to keep his mouth shut? Oh my goodness. It's just gotten crazy. And it's crazy in our own country with this whole situation with Kevin McCarthy being booted out. And now they're trying to get Jim Jordan in, and it just broke that Jim Jordan does not have the votes. I don't know what they're going to do today. He is not have the votes, so I don't know if he's going to step down and they're going to put somebody else up. I have no idea what's going on. But I will say this. I have been very proud of the response on social media. I've been very proud of the response of individual citizens, because this is what we need to do. We need to respond to them. I mean, they have been just butchered and on Twitter to the extent that so many of them have taken to X, formerly Twitter, to say, you cannot intimidate me. I will not be intimidated by what you say. I will not be intimidated by any of you. I will not be intimidated by my constituents to do the right thing for my constituents. That's what they're really saying. I'm not going to do the right thing for you who elected me and put me in office, but I'm going to do what suits me. I'm going to do what's best for me. Me. That's what all of this is about. And Representative Bacon, there was a rally that was held by the Nebraska Freedom Caucus in front of his office with a bunch of protesters saying, vote for Jim Jordan. We don't like what you're doing. And he's all, I served in the military. I served in Iraq. It's all about him. And it is all about them. And as Bill said before, they're probably getting paid to vote a certain way. They're probably being paid by lobbyists. He said George Soros. What's the difference? But in any case, I ran across a clip recently of Steve Bannon where he said he has proof. And I will let him say it in his words.
Iniquity in Washington, D.C. in the swamp, but I have spies everywhere. Folks were calling me last night from the Capitol Grill, which is the worst of the worst. And that's all. And the lobbyists were literally walking around cutting deals with people at the tables. They said a couple of people that are going to be added to this, they were in full view, maybe having a few adult beverages, cutting deals with the lobbyists to vote against Jordan.
Well, and honestly, Steve, do you think they're worried if they lose their seat? They're going to have a job lined up with one of those firms. They're going to get some book deal. They'll get a gig on CNN or MSNBC or wherever else they can to go bash all of us. So they're not, they know that either way, they still get to keep power and keep access to money, and that's what they care about.
I'm not a fan of Tom Emmer being the whip on this. I think Emmer, who's a never Trumper, is trying to move pieces around so that he can take a shot at this in case everything else fails.
Well, there you have it. They are being paid by lobbyists. They're being paid by their donors to vote a certain way because they cannot have Jim Jordan as a speaker. And I'll say, if they don't want him as speaker, I want him as speaker. I want him as speaker. But what they're doing is they're listening to the money, give me money, which has been going on, for a very long time. Bribery, blackmail, all of these things have been going on for a very long time. But Representative Bacon whose first name is either Don or Dan, I think it's Don Bacon from Nebraska, has been really just outspoken, talking about, he's not going to let anybody intimidate him. Oh, no, but he'll let people bribe him. He'll let people blackmail him or talk him into, oh, we'll give you this or we'll give you that if you vote against Jim Jordan. And he is a very one who tweeted out that it was horrible that 8 Republicans were able to have this speaker seat vacated by 8 Republicans. Well, aren't you doing the same thing, Representative Bacon? Aren't you doing the same thing? You're holding up the speaker vote. Now it's 22 Republicans, which is a little more than 8, but it doesn't matter. The point is, you're holding up the vote. We're going to end up with Hakeem Jeffries as Speaker of the House pretty soon. And that's not a joke. That's actually a possibility. That would be really, really crazy. But now that what happened was Jim Jordan couldn't get the votes. And so he proposed that they give the Speaker Pro Tem, Patrick McHenry, the power of Speaker temporarily until they could figure this out. And the Republican, the same 22, no, we don't want to do that. That's unprecedented. Well, a lot of things are unprecedented. They don't become a precedent until they happen. And then it's precedented. But the other thing about that is it's also unprecedented to oust a Speaker of the House. It's unprecedented to do a lot of these things. Just because it's unprecedented doesn't mean maybe you should start the trend. Maybe it's not a bad thing. I don't know. I honestly do not know the answer to this, but what I do know is the Republicans need to get their act together. And I will tell you, one of the things that I'm seeing in all of this is we now have a clear list of who needs to be primaried. I mean, 22 Republicans that I can see need to be primaried. There's a division between who is a keeper and who isn't. I mean, come on, vote for Jim Jordan. He's a good guy. He's done a lot of good stuff. And that's what they don't want. They don't want anything to get done. They don't want we, the people, to be given the proper place. Well, I say, I don't have a list in front of me of those 22 who will not vote for Jim Jordan. But if your representative is one of them. And if your representative is one of them, I encourage you to email them, to write them, to call their office and tell them to stop this ridiculousness and to vote. And I'm not going to tell you how I think they should vote for Jim Jordan, but vote according to what your constituents want you to do. Vote that way. My reps are on board, whatever, but they still also need to be called and encouraged and thanked and told, we stand behind you, whatever, because they're all coming under terrific fire. I don't know what is going to happen. I don't know where this is going to go, but it's kind of interesting to watch it. And it's interesting to watch it in light of spiritual reality, in the spiritual realm, what is happening, what is going on. It is very, very interesting to see. One of the things that God does is he puts us in a place where we have no alternative but to turn to him. I've been in that place in my personal life. I know some of you have, and it's a very uncomfortable place to be. But he wants all of us to realize that we can't do this ourselves, that we need him, that we need to depend on him. And he's way smarter than we are. He knows way more than we do about everything and anything. I told a story about the kitten that we got, who turned out to be a really good playmate for one of our dogs, who really all she wanted to do was play. And I wrote a line in there that several people have grabbed onto. And it was, who knew that the very thing that I said I absolutely did not want turned out to be the very thing that was an answer for our dog who needed a playmate. And that is exactly what God does. The stone the builders rejected turned out to be the cornerstone. And it happens again and again and again. And who knows who the speaker is going to be, but it very may likely be somebody that none of us thought about, none of us considered. Nobody thought, is that one who is hiding in the threshing floor. Who knows? I don't know. Some people think it's going to end up being Patrick McHenry, but it looks like the House is not going to let that happen. I have no idea. We just don't know, but it's interesting to watch it play out. As frustrating as it is, as difficult as it is, it really does cause people to come to the forefront and let you know exactly who they are and exactly what they're thinking. Whether it's in a video of them accepting a bribe or whether it's them standing strong. It is, you see who people are. Where the rubber meets the road, that's when this stuff comes out. And that call to action in front of Representative Bacon's office happened on Thursday at 10 a.m. So that's already happened, and I hope it was a good event. I haven't followed up on it, but I'm sure it was. I'm sure he didn't pay any attention to it because that's the kind of guy he is. We talk a lot about the 2020 presidential election, and I want to get back to that because I found this to be a very interesting poll. And again, we're always sort of iffy on polls, but the question was, how likely is it that cheating affected the outcome of the 2020 presidential election? 43% of all the people polled, Democrats, Republicans, Independents, said very likely. 19% said somewhat likely. So between the somewhat and the very, you have more than 50% of the people saying it probably happened. A lot of people don't want to be on the far end of these polls on either way. They don't want to be the most or the least. So they usually try to find a middle ground. Among Republicans, it's 53% who say it's very likely and 27% who say somewhat likely. Among independents, it's 46% very and 18% somewhat. And among Democrats, it's actually 32% who say it is very likely and 13% who say it is somewhat. Now, that is the only group, Democrats are the only group between all and Republican and independents, where the number who say not at all likely is higher than the very likely. But still, it's a large percentage, because what they're saying is that their candidate was 32% of them was very likely not actually fairly elected. And I think that's huge. Now, this survey was taken between April and May in 2023. I think it would actually probably be higher if it was taken now. I think there's a lot of information that has come out recently that would tell people to put them in a different camp. So in our Go Woke, Go Broke segment, which we've done a lot of recently, Victoria's Secret, who was using transgender people as their models, are now going back to what they call sexy attire. So they're completely, because they're losing money. There are all these companies that go woke are going broke, just as President Trump said they would. Just exactly that. And so here's another example of go woke, go broke. And just recently, in the past 24 hours, we had a missile strike from, they say it was not exactly from Iran, but that one of our ships shot down the missiles that were coming. They said it was another errant missile from the Houthis, but that's Iran. And they say they were aiming for Israel. Who knows, again, what the where the truth lies. We just don't know where the truth lies. We will probably never know. And that's one of the sad things about all of this is in my lifetime, I have lived through the, I was born in 1958. So I've lived through a lot of different things. And now I'm looking at all these things that I lived through with totally different eyes. It is, at first, of course, JFK was assassinated by Lee Harvey Oswald. And of course, everybody, I think, believed that at the time. But of course, now all that information has come out, and we know that that was not the case. He was a patsy. And of course, he had to lose his life rather than speak up about it. But more and more and more, I'm beginning to realize that all this stuff that people have been saying that we thought were conspiracy theories for years have turned out not to be the case. I mean, it's not just JFK, it's so many other things that have gone on, so many things that have been orchestrated by our own CIA or our own FBI. With the J6 thing just recently, January 6th thing, where they labeled all these people insurrectionists. They went to their homes, they raided grandparents and arrested them. And then we've been labeled, as you know, MAGA Republicans have been labeled as domestic terrorists. We are the biggest threat there is. No, white supremacists are. I mean, they come up with all this stuff. They feed people this garbage. And unfortunately, people believe this stuff. They believe what they're being told because they think the media is telling the truth. But the good news is the media is also losing trust with the American people. I mean, it is plummeting, and it should have plummeted a long time ago. I think it takes a long time for people to wake up to what is happening in what is reality. The media, most of what they say, as I said earlier, most of what they say is just they're just like a minor bird. They're just repeating what they're told. They're given this script and you say this, which is one reason why Carrie Lake got out of that profession, because she saw what was happening. She saw the handwriting on the wall. She saw what they were trying to do to people, and she was not going to be party of that. And now she's running for senator in Arizona. And I personally believe that she won the governorship, the gubernatorial race in Arizona. They're still fighting that in the courts. They're still, the case is not completely resolved. And so, who knows? Wouldn't that be funny if she won her senatorial race and found out she had won the gubernatorial race, and then she would have to go, which one do I do? And I will tell you this, in my opinion, this debacle in our House representatives where they cannot come, I think a lot of this is being driven by Mitch McConnell. I think Mitch McConnell cannot stand the thought of Jim Jordan. He hates President Trump and he hates MAGA Republicans. And I think that he is probably behind a lot of this. The senators have been very vocal in some of them in saying, come on, House, get your act together. They do need to get their act together. And I don't think that I agree with Don Bacon in this. I don't think that these people are going to be swayed. I don't think they're going to change their minds, particularly if they're taking money for voting a certain way. Money talks. The love of money is the root of all evil. Pay somebody enough and, you can get them to say or do just about anything. And we've seen that, and we're seeing it. We are seeing evil running rampant, not just in our country, but in the whole world. I mean, we're in all kinds of situations that we would not have been in if President Trump was president. I mean, I don't think that Russia would have invaded Ukraine. I don't think that this situation in Israel would have happened, because they know that he wouldn't just sit there and say, don't, which is exactly what Biden said, and exactly in that tone of voice. I mean, he goes over there to Israel, and I will tell you, you know this by now, they went over to Israel to delay Israel's response to Hamas. They wanted to delay them. They want them to stand down, basically, and they want them to, give them back the electricity. Now, the Israeli government told the people in the Gaza to get out. They gave them information on where you can go and where you can get food and where you can, stay or whatever. And they warned them, which they always do. They always warn the civilians. Well, then, Hamas uses them as human shields. But this situation, I don't know. I know that Israel is forever. Israel will continue to be a country. It will continue to exist. Hamas, however, will not. Israel will bring Hamas to nothing. When President Trump realized what was going on with ISIS, he got rid of it, wiped it out. And Israel will do the same. They have said they would, and I believe that they will. One of the things that I think I said before is that all of this stuff is happening. Well, God is allowing it to happen. Not that he's orchestrating this. We all have a free will. He's just allowing it to happen. But one of the reasons is to wake people up. Wake up and see what is going on. And I think in the next couple of years, next 2-3 years, or maybe even sooner, the veil is going to be lifted. We are going to see the truth. We're going to see the truth of who Biden really is. We're going to see the truth of who's been pulling the puppet strings. We're going to see the truth of who is really the good guys and really the bad guys. And there are good guys and bad guys, women and men. We're going to see the truth of what's been going on in the media. We're going to see the truth of what's going on in the political realm. God is going to pull the curtain back, and it is not pretty. But one of the things that I think is happening is you can't see it all at one time. It will totally overwhelm your brain. When I was 14, we had a fire in my house. We all almost died. It was 3:00 in the morning and we got out. It was an absolute miracle that we got out. But my mother, we were at our neighbor's house, spent the rest of the night at our neighbor's house. And my mother sent my sister and myself over to the house to see how bad the damage was. And we walked in and we were looking around and we said, oh, this is not so bad. And we went back to our mother and we said, Mom, it's not that bad. It needs some work. Some things were damaged, but it's okay. We can deal with it. And then we went back several hours later. Firemen were still there. And we looked around and we said, oh my gosh, did another fire break out? We asked the firemen if another fire broke out. And they said no. And we said, what happened? This is way worse than it was. And they smiled. And one of them said, we have seen this a lot. Your brain has a protection on it that you cannot see. It protects you from seeing the full extent of the damage all at one time. And so therefore, when you first came in here, you were only seeing a little bit because your brain would not have been able to accept it. Your emotions wouldn't have been able to accept it. And so now you've had several hours and you come back, there's no new damage. It's just that you're seeing what was already there because you can handle it now. It's a piecemeal thing. And that's what I think is happening in the world. The Band-Aid's not going to be ripped off all at once. We are going to see the truth, and the truth is horrific. The truth is horrible. In fact, God told me one time, not long ago, they have done things so horrific and so horrible and so awful that I'm not going to tell you about it because it would upset you too much. And that was several years ago. And now I think the Band-Aid is going to come off. And I think some of the things that we are going to see, it's going to be hard to believe. It's worse than you think. It's going to be difficult to accept, but it is the truth. And the other thing that I want to say, as we always like to leave you with, is do not fear and do not comply. But when I say do not comply with the enemy who is trying to put you in fear. Fear is a powerful tool of the enemy. Fear is what they have used in our country and others for decades. For decades, they try to keep us in fear. One of the reasons is they make a lot of money off wars. Okay, they want to keep us in war, but that's a whole topic for a whole nother day. Do not give in to fear. It is a tool of the enemy. Do not give the enemy the satisfaction that you are afraid. Do not fear. Be strong and courageous, for the Lord thy God is with you wherever you go. And I know it looks bad, and I know it can be difficult. But just remember this. Crying may extend for the night, but joy will come in the morning. God will right this ship. People will see justice. We will see President Trump prevail. It will happen because he said it was happen, and he is not a man that he can lie. It will happen. It will not be easy ever. I remember when President Trump was first elected in 2016. Steve Bannon said to all of us, don't think that this is over just because he won the election. They will not allow him any freedom. They will come after him, all this stuff. And I remember, I'll be honest, I was thinking, oh, he doesn't know what he's talking about. President Trump won. Everything's going to be great. The very day of the inauguration, I don't remember what publication it was, but the headline said, now let the impeachment begin. And there are still people to this day, now whether they actually believe it, I don't know, who say that President Trump stole the 2016 elections with the help of Russia, which we all know is not true. It is difficult, I admit, to separate the truth from the fake, because there's so many fake things out there. Now the internet is replete with all of these different entities who are telling you different things, and sometimes it is really, really hard to know who to believe. We do the best we can to give you the truth as we know it. And I will say this, getting spiritual again. Pay attention to the Holy Spirit. Ask him to show you. Ask him to tell you. Ask him to give you the insight as to what's going on, what to believe, what to do. Just ask him on a regular basis, because he knows, and he will tell you, and he will guide you, and he will be with you. But again, we have to ask. We have to go before him individually and say, help me. We have to go before him sooner or later as a country, because every knee will bow and every tongue will confess that Jesus is Lord. It will happen. And so I encourage all of you, pray for President Trump, pray for peace in Israel, and pray for Bibi, that he has the wisdom and discernment and the fortitude that he will need in order to fight this battle in the way that it needs to be fought. Pray for our country and pray for the House of Representatives. I honestly don't know what's going to happen. I asked him, but he hadn't told me. So all I know is pray for the will of the Father to be done. Pray for your families. And always remember, the Holy Spirit is way smarter than we are. Whew! And I did it without Bill. It was not easy because I count on him to have something to say about things. And I know some of you are very disappointed that it's me and not Bill, because some of you always express, I don't like your wife. Well, that's why I put my name only. So you see my name, then you know. Don't watch, don't listen, because you're not going to like it. And that's not all that I'm going to have to say about that. Thank you, and see you next week. Maybe we'll have a new Speaker of the House. Who knows?
Beth and I are trying to rebuild this channel, but we can't do it without you. If you value this type of historical analysis with just a touch of humor, please subscribe to this channel and share it around with your friends. And if you can't afford to donate, I hate to say it, but we really need people to step up right now with a recurrent amount so that we don't have to go arm twisting every month. You can find us on PayPal at thestillreport@gmail.com, Patreon at the following link, or Subscribestar at Still Report. We are still reporting from just outside the citadel of world freedom. Good day.